It's the end of the world, as we tell him. It's the end of the world, as we tell him. It's the end of the world, as we tell him. And I feel fine.
Sports Interactive have released their latest development update, and if the internet is anything to go by, it's the end of the world as we know it. But is it? Let's have a look through what's been announced so far and why features being removed is a good thing. First, September's update, and we start with possibly the biggest news to date. FM25 has been delayed. The official announcement, which was due early September, has been pushed back to the end of the month, and the game's release, which was due early November, will follow suit. Development, in the words of Miles, has been trickier than we originally anticipated. That's what has caused the delays so far, and until we get concrete news on the release date, it's not unreasonable to be concerned that there may be more delays to come. But personally, I'm not worried. It's 3 weeks. Not insignificant, but not terminal. We know that releasing before Christmas is important, and announcing repeated delays is bad. SI therefore have some leeway and could have announced a slightly longer delay. Maybe 4 to 6 weeks if they weren't confident in the remaining timetable. That wasn't the entirety of the blog though, so let's talk about removed features. Both those mentioned in the latest update and in the update earlier in the summer. International football management is gone from FM25. Not international football, just our ability to be the manager. The reason given, what we were planning to deliver wouldn't reach our initial quality threshold. Miles has explained previously that there are 3 key considerations as they migrate features over to a new engine. Would we do it in the same way if we had our time again? Would we have done this at all? Do we have the time required to do this to the highest possible standard in our first cycle of a new era? It is safe for us to assume that the third of those questions is why it's been cut temporarily. The question I'm interested in, however, is the first. Would we do it in the same way if we had our time again? Miles has said that international management will return in a much more feature-rich way to FM26. This implies that they would not have done it in the same way if they had their time again. International management has been much maligned for a very long time, and it seems that SI agrees it needs to be reworked. This is ultimately why I've decided to make this video. I know nothing about Football Manager's backend. I have no insight into their development processes, but I do have experience with software migration. As an analyst, not a developer, I should add. So let's talk about the things we do know. Football Manager is moving from its in-house engine to Unity. In-house is great. It gives you full control. Everything is specific and bespoke to your own needs. You define everything. Which is its problem. Your knowledge is completely internal. Maintenance is internal. If something isn't documented, that knowledge can be lost when someone leaves. It takes a lot longer to induct new developers as they need to learn your software. Third party, in this case Unity, is also great. Knowledge is more broadly available. Recruitment and onboarding is easier. You can access external support for maintenance. In return, you lose some control. Your code has to conform to the parameters and limitations of that third party. So how does this impact international football management, for example? I cannot stress enough that what I'm about to say is pure speculation. I do not know anything about Football Manager's backend, but as a player, I can observe. We know that international football does not have training. This causes issues with players' fitness. In fact, we know that even whilst on international duty, players' training is still controlled by their club. If you are managing a club and have a player on international duty, you can rest them, and it will take effect. So the solution is to give international managers control of training for the duration of the international break, right? Well, if the solution was that easy, it would be done. Perhaps untethering the player from their club's training setup causes issues, inadvertently undoing things like positional or additional training foci. Maybe because the attribute development aspect of training is irrelevant to international football, an entirely separate training module is needed, and this just doesn't work within the current structure. Whatever the reason may be, it's clearly not as simple as turn on training for international football. Now, if that was the reason, I'm not saying it is, nor that it's the only issue with international football, then it's entirely plausible that they need to rethink how club training works and make sure that element can be malleable to the needs of international training further down the line. It would be a colossal waste of time to implement all training-related features and international management as they currently are in the new engine, to then immediately rip them all apart. So as dumb as it might sound, but hearing that international football management will not be in FM25 this late in development actually makes me more confident in the game. SI have identified the problems and the solution, as well as their own limitations, and made difficult decisions. These are all good things. Of course, that is not the only feature that will be missing from FM25. Back in July, Miles announced the removal for the foreseeable future of touchline shouts. Them not happening instantly, and the period of effect not being clear was cited as reasons. In a later Twitter thread, he expanded that they do not do what many people think they do. They are tactical adjustments, not body language modifiers. An adjustment might result in a player's body language changing, but that is because they are reacting to the tactical change. Now, this makes sense for some shouts. Palm down or fire up directly relates to how hard you want a player to tackle. But what does berate or focus change? Is there a magic stop being useless instruction I've missed? I suppose that backs up Miles' claim that they do not do what we think they do. And clearly there needs to be better communication in game. Not just for shouts, I may add. Does this necessitate removing them entirely? I'm not so sure, especially as there is no timetable for their return. It doesn't appear that a clear solution is in mind. After all, this is a feature that gives players agency, and managers are shouting instructions at their players in real life. That said, I must admit I've never considered touchline shouts as being akin to a manager actually shouting on the touchline. I'm yet to see Jose Mourinho bark out words of encouragement and then sit silently for the next 15 minutes. For the feeling of agency, well, we can still make tactical adjustments, and perhaps by being more in control of what adjustments we make, this might actually be more impactful. We've also lost a lot of the supplemental game modes: Create a Club, Versus Mode, Challenge Mode, and Fantasy Draft, each slated for a return with different timetables. Draft Mode to be a mid-cycle release for FM25, Create a Club in FM26, Challenge Mode in FM26 or FM27, and Versus Mode sometime. Maybe. It'll be interesting to see if delays to FM25 have a knock-on effect for these timetables. Moreover, hindsight is 2020. I imagine that if they knew that international management was not going to be feasible for FM25, they might have shelved it a little earlier and prioritised having, say, draft mode ready on release. There's a few features being removed I've skipped over until now. The social media screen has gone. The information will still appear in other areas. This is not worthy of news. The data chalkboard is another casualty, more specifically the one accessed via a player's profile. This one. Nobody knows it exists, less than 1% use it, so again, this is not news. And finally, a player's weight will no longer be displayed on their profile. Specifically, a very basic measurement will still be included under the hood, but it won't be visible on the front end anymore. This also isn't news. Weight is an inconsistent metric. It fluctuates. A club's medical team might keep records, but not for public consumption, and SI's researchers can't just turn up at the training ground with a pair of scales. At best, weight is an approximation, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of players in the database without a weight entered. It has no impact in the match engine. Agility, balance, and strength do. I am, however, confused as to why this was included in the update at all. Nobody cares. A search through the SI forums returned 0 results pertaining to a player's weight in FM in the last 3 months. That was until Wednesday, where it has now suddenly become the single most important nugget of information that has ever existed, and SI have gone woke. This is ultimately where I'm going to be most critical of SI. If we consider each game mode as being a separate entity, that's 9 features being removed, a third of which aren't significant enough to warrant mentioning, but by including them, it just makes everything feel worse. It does all seem a little doom and gloom. This is clearly a deliberate choice by SI. Use the development updates to deliver the bad news, use the game announcement and subsequent rollout period to focus on the good stuff. It's a risky strategy. The good old-fashioned shit sandwich, where you soften bad news by surrounding it with good news, isn't really appropriate here. After all, it doesn't matter how delicious the bread is, it's still going to taste like feces. But if you serve dung as an appetizer, you're going to need one hell of a palate cleanser before the entree to make sure that scatological tang doesn't linger. Call me foolish if you want, but I've always enjoyed Football Manager. To varying degrees, sure, some additions have been better than others. None have been perfect. And none ever will, but they've always been enjoyable. So I'm confident. I'll rinse my mouth out with medical grade alcohol and wait for the main course.